Kevin Nelson. Here's a look at what's going on this week in the news. We begin from the Vatican. Pope Francis kicked off the Share the Journey campaign at his general audience this past week at the Vatican. The program is meant to urge Catholics to understand and get to know refugees and migrants and the reasons they have fled their homeland. Rome Reports has more from the Vatican.
Share the Journey, a campaign by Caritas, was launched by Pope Francis in front of thousands in St. Peter's Square on September 27th. The mission is to ask the world to open their arms to the possibility of accompanying migrants on their journey. At a Holy See press conference, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, the president of Caritas Internationales, spoke of the importance of this mission and his own experience coming from a migrant family.
So through the culture of personal encounter, we hope that there will be some sort of a conversion of mind. Many people who are afraid of migrants, some of them have not even encountered a single migrant. Hopefully, we could invite the leaders to meet a migrant, get the hand of a migrant, smell a migrant, listen to their stories. And you will see that they are like you and me. They are not really other. Whenever I meet a migrant, I'm reminded of my grandfather who migrated from China as a poor boy, came to the Philippines. Who would think that he would produce a cardinal grandson?
The common theme spreading amongst those promoting the campaign is the idea that each person should encounter a refugee and break the prejudices surrounding them. The objective may seem really simple, almost trivial. The gesture is really important. The gesture to reach out, the sign of welcome we really want to give to the potential encounter that everyone can have, but that is sometimes blocked by a sense of fear and a sense of prejudice.
U.S. partners in the campaign effort are the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and its Migration and Refugee Services, Catholic Relief Services, and Catholic Charities USA. Organizations have developed a toolkit in English and Spanish that includes prayers, suggestions for activities for families, prayer groups, classrooms, and clergy, and utilizing social media with references to #ShareJourney. In news from around the country, when Hurricane Maria made landfall in Puerto Rico with its 155-mile-per-hour winds knocked out electricity to the entire island, leaving its 3.4 million people in the dark. Over a week later, most of the island remained without power, and officials have said the situation could last up to 6 months. The humanitarian emergency continues in the U.S. territory with not only a loss of power, but a lack of drinkable water, fuel, and numerous necessities. Catholic organizations are stepping up to help. Catholic Charities USA has sent $1 million in emergency aid, which will assist Caritas Puerto Rico as it begins the work of recovery. The Knights of Columbus has raised more than $2.8 million as part of an ongoing national appeal that builds on the donations and relief work of the Knights themselves. They have donated $100,000 to Puerto Rico to aid victims of Maria, an additional $100,000 to Mexico for victims of the earthquakes that have struck that country. In addition to financial support, many Knights have helped to rescue stranded neighbors, provide assistance, which has included the distribution of more than $720,000 in food, water, and other necessities. In news from around the world, even though we have heard about some of the atrocities committed on Christians and religious minorities, especially in the Middle East, there are many instances where this persecution is not being brought to light. Rome Reports talks to an expert about a new book that makes the case that the biggest problem facing persecuted Christians today is silence.
It's been more than 3 years since 276 schoolgirls and boys were kidnapped by Boko Haram in Nigeria. While many of them have been released, a case study has recently been conducted and published, proving one of the underlying problems with terror against Christian women and children: silence.
My purpose behind the book was that there was a silence, almost internationally, a consensus on the silence of any harm being done to Christians. I think we're all about being careful that we're not shouting hate speech, et cetera, against any group. However, not to recognize and not to use the word Christian is a problem internationally.
By studying the Boko Haram case, Jane uncovered a certain silence that she says is present in many parts of the world. To break this silence, Jane published her findings in this book, Genocide of Christians in the Middle East. Along with 12 other contributors, the book tackles the many components of persecution, from international humanitarian law to the Holy See's diplomatic response to the problem.
I I think what's happening in our society is that there is this underlying assumption that it's okay to hate Christians. They are being raped, they are being put into these slavery centers, sold off the internet, etc. We know that, and why aren't we mentioning that?
Jane says that in order to combat future and ongoing harm being done to Christian women and children, this stigma of silence needs to be broken so these school children can return home and others can be protected.
And finally in the news, with the recent reports that the Trump administration is going to be limiting the number of refugees it accepts to 45,000 in the upcoming year, faith groups are voicing their objections. The number would be the lowest admission level for persons fleeing persecution that the U.S. has accepted since the executive branch was allowed to set the caps in 1980 under the Refugee Act. Bill O'Keefe, Vice President for Government Relations and Advocacy for Catholic Relief Services, said that with historically high numbers of innocent people fleeing violence worldwide, the United States response cannot be to welcome a historically low number of refugees into our country. Other faith groups, including the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, the second largest refugee resettlement agency in the U.S., said it was profoundly disappointed at the reduction. According to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, 1 in every 113 people in the world is facing displacement from their home country because of conflicts. Well, that is all the information we have for you this time. I'm Kevin Nelson. Don't forget, you can keep up to date on Catholic news throughout the week with Catholic Newsbreak right here on the Catholic TV network.